Vitriolage is defined as the throwing of the corrosive acids with a malicious intent to cause disfigurement of the face. So, vitriolage is quite commonly observed in a lot of countries and is a dilemma that a forensic practitioner has to deal with. The corrosives basically cause a lot of disfigurement, and so they have their own poisonous effects inside the body, but still their corrosive action on external surfaces is quite evident. So in this section, basically, we are dealing with the corrosive acids as well as the alkalis and the phenols. What are the toxicological symptoms in these cases, and what are the autopsy findings that are particular to these poisonous substances? First of all, as I was already emphasizing this fact that the corrosive poisons have a lot of destructive actions. So that will be discussed. First of all, what are the destructive effects of these corrosive, these acids and these phenols? And then we'll be discussing the corrosive acids in particular very briefly, but quite comprehensively. How are we going to deal with such cases? These corrosive acids are also known as the oil of vitriol, and the most common acid that is being used for this vitriolage is sulfuric acid. So the treatment modalities also depend upon, if external surfaces are mostly involved, then the treatment will depend upon mainly the external treatment. If it is ingested accidentally in a homicidal intent or with a suicidal intent, then we'll basically differ our treatment modality. Then the corrosive alkaline and the phenols are also discussed in this section. So the corrosive acids, alkalis and phenols, the common suicidal agents are basically this corrosive acids and alkalis and phenols. All of them are commonly used as suicidal agents, but rarely it can be of a homicidal intent, as well as it can be of an accidental origin. Then it is used for homicide, assault, that is the vitriol throwing, as I was already mentioning, and this is also known as vitriolage. So this act which is done, the throwing of the acid on the face or even the body of a person to cause disfigurement with a malicious intent, it is known as the vitriolage. And basically it is dealt with in along the different countries have different legal aspects to this vitriolage, and so it is depending upon the country in which you are practicing. And the suicide is also one of the causes of this corrosive acid, alkalis and this phenol poisoning. The structural damage is, of course, one of the destructive effects that occur after these acids are thrown. Now, the renal failure or the chest infections that will be discussed later on. What are the complications that occur after this corrosive acid, alkalis, and this phenol poisoning? Death ultimately occurs after this kind of poisoning if there is some fatal injury that has occurred to the human body, or if there is some sort of an asphyxiating condition that will also result in the death in these people. The destructive effects basically include it corrodes the skin. So first of all, the topmost destructive effect, because we already mentioned that it is with a malicious intent and just to cause disfigurement. So the corrosive action on the skin is the topmost destructive effect over here. Lips may be burnt in cases where the oil of vitriol is thrown on the lips. Then the trickle and the splash marks. So the trickle marks are basically you have observed with all liquids, if you spill some liquid on your clothes, there are some trickle marks. So that is basically what happens in these cases of corrosive poisoning. After you throw that liquid on the face, once the liquid is thrown on the face of the victim, there are trickle marks found on the human body. In front of the neck, in front of the chest, and that will basically depend upon the corrosive action or the oil of vitriol that has been used. Mostly sulfuric acid is being used, the concentrated kind of sulfuric acid, the spluttering and the gagging. So if the neck muscles are involved, it can be an asphyxiating condition, and so that will result in the gagging phenomena. Tongue is swollen after this corrosive and destructive action. It's basically, it is shriveled and it is swollen. In some cases, in a lot of cases, the pharynx, larynx, and the esophagus erosions also occur. The glottis area may become quite edematous after that corrosive and after that inflammatory reaction. The respiratory mucosal damage is one of the kinds, and that will also result in the asphyxiation of the person. And once the person is in the respiratory distress, it's basically a medical emergency. Now, the pulmonary edema and hemorrhage is one of the complications after this corrosive action, after these corrosives are thrown on some person, and discoloration and desquamation of the esophagus. So the whole of the digestive tract is basically involved after this corrosive poison is thrown on the victim. And if some part is ingested by mistake, so it will also basically discolor or desquamate the esophagus. That is why the gastric lavage is contraindicated in this kind of corrosive poisoning. So it is basically the highlight of this section that as a medical officer, as a forensic practitioner, you will not perform nasogastric lavage on a person who is being brought to you in the medical emergency and the oil of vitriol has been thrown on that person, because that will cause basically the perforation of the esophagus or the GI tract. Then the spasm of pylorus. So it is one of the complications that a spasm of pylorus will occur. And fulminating bronchopneumonia is another complication that is observed in a lot of cases in cases of corrosive poisoning. So different actions on different tissues, differentiated by appearance and smell. So once you have that person in the emergency, there is a pungent smell to that person, and that will basically highlight that it is the case of corrosive poisoning. Phenols are detected by smells only. So it is basically the highlight over here that the pungent smell is basically going to be characteristic for phenols over here. Strong acid basically dehydrates the tissues and it coagulates the proteins and it converts the hemoglobin to hematine. So that is basically the chemical reaction that is taking at under level. Now the corrosive acids basically include the sulfuric acid that is extremely corrosive and it produces great heat, and the tissues are gray to black with no dehydration. The gastric lining is gray, dark brown or black. So these are basically the findings that you will observe in such a case of corrosive poisoning. And perforation is seen in the gastric mucosa or in the esophagus. Esophagus and stomach are gray and swollen. Even the glottis and the epiglottis are inflamed in these cases. Talking about the nitric acid, there will be mucosal damage and the skin burns of face. Yellow fumes from the stomach contents. Sloughing through the perforation is quite less common. Moving on to the hydrochloric acid, it's basically the similar effects on the other acids and not so injurious as if you compare it with the sulfuric acid and the nitric acid. And the stomach is softened and perforations are also observed in such cases. So if we compare this sodium hydroxide and carbolic acid, it's basically sodium hydroxide is a corrosive. It's a soft slippery slime and the color is dirty white to gray. So these are the physical characteristics to it. When we talk about the carbolic acid, it basically stiffens the tissues and bleach them. It is a cracked whitish surface on the face and the skin, and the esophagus and the stomach stiffens in this case. Talking about the lysol, it basically discolors the tissues. Brownish purple discoloration is given to the tissues, and it is similar to phenol in the underlying chemical reaction. So in this section, basically, we dealt with the corrosive acids and the alkalis as well as the action of the phenols on the human body and how are we going to identify these poisonous cases and deal with them. That is the end to this section. Thank you for watching sqadia.com.